So I am truly honored as a superintendent here in Central School District to start off our meeting tonight with the recognition of our board of directors, as January is School Board Recognition Month. And so to begin this, I will read the statement from the state of Oregon, the proclamation from the Office of the Governor. And it states, whereas Oregonians rely on public education to ensure a prosperous quality of life and strong economic health for Oregon, and whereas local elected boards fulfill leadership roles and serve as the conduit through which teachers, parents, businesses, and communities demonstrate the care, creativity, and support that leads to student achievement, and whereas public schools nurture and train diverse student populations to the best of their abilities, whatever the resources, to give students the knowledge, skills, and opportunities they need to succeed. And whereas board members build the framework that makes it possible for education organizations to teach Oregon children, and whereas the committed men and women who serve on the boards of the Oregon's 197 school districts, 19 educational service districts, and 17 community colleges deserve recognition and thanks for their dedication to the education needs of the people of Oregon. Now, therefore, I, Kate Brown, Governor of the state of Oregon, hereby proclaim January 2018 to be School Board Recognition Month in Oregon, and encourage all Oregonians to join in this observance. So this is my time to sort of brag about our board. And so a couple things. You can see right behind me and on the screen to the right for the people in the audience that this year there is a focus of this month on superheroes in regards to OSBA and some of their focus with this. So the board knows me quite well. I, of course, did some research with some great minds who know and understand superheroes and their traits. Kids, specifically some of my nieces and nephew who are experts in the Marvel comic arena. I also think it's important, and you'll understand, and I've shared with you all, one of my great passions for learning is in reading and literacy. And so again, as I share with you today a little bit about each of one of you that I have reflected on for recognition, it just is an avenue that as you continue to look at ways to learn, reading, comics, books, audio, books on tape, etc., are just great learning opportunities. So I'm just excited to share a little bit of my reflection on each of you tonight. We also reached out to our schools. I see you over there, Mr. Wall. We also reached out to our schools and some of our resident artists to recognize you with a local gift as well. So with that, I am going to share a little bit of information about each board member and the superhero I believe that correlates to them. Are we ready? Okay. First, Director Jerry Schinkel as Iron Man. Iron Man is known for building his own heart to survive. He is an engineer and an industrialist. He likes to tinker and build things. This reminds me of you, Jerry, as from the beginning you have been crystal clear that we need to build systems and plans to allow our students to have an understanding of the opportunities in career and technical education. That we focus not only on college, but the development of the workforce within our programming. We are in the midst of building this plan, obviously. Like you, Jerry, this is one of my beliefs in giving students the opportunity to be both college and career ready. I thank you for your service with the Central School District. And your artist in resident that drew your picture was Austin Luthen, a 4th grade student at Monmouth Elementary. So if you can come up here for me. First, your Iron Man book and your frame art.
There. All right.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. This is totally undeserved, but I'll take it.
All right, Director Peggy Klein, your superhero is Green Lantern. You are Green Lantern. Green Lantern's character is known for using the power of light to help the team. The character is known for the ability to be focused on the greater team and everyone's strengths. This reminds me of you, Peggy, as your lens focus on equity has been bright from the beginning. That is a true core philosophy for me, and I really, that means a great deal to me. Your lens of equity and your ability to look at the strengths of people is why I chose this character for you. I thank you for your service in the Central School District. The artist in residence that drew your picture was Demi Oberlin, and she's a second grade student at Monmouth Elementary School. So here's your reading of Green Lantern. And your... Yes, that was a second grader that drew that. Director Don Wall, you are my friend Spider-Man. Are you ready? Spider-Man, from the beginning of his existence, felt a vow of responsibility in his role, which led him to a path of humanitarian services. This reminds me of you, Don, with your involvement in the community with the Gate and the mentorship program you have developed and continue to grow, as well as your involvement with the YMCA, as they provide amazing services and opportunities for our students and communities. I also think of you related to Spider-Man, as one of his traits is his sense of humor. You didn't know that, did you?
Yeah.
You did know that? No, you didn't. Since the moment I spent a few days with you in July in Bend, Oregon at the OSBA conference, I am always appreciative of the humor that you bring to the conversation. I thank you for your service to the Central School District, and your artist in residence that drew your picture was Evan Fuentes de los Santos, a third grade student at Independence Elementary School. So here is your reading material. And he wrote a graphic type of picture for you. All right. Director and Vice Chair Steve Love, you are Daredevil. You'll know why in a second. The Daredevil character is known as the man without fear, that he will take risks. This reminds me of you, Steve, as you were the board chair who took the risks, called me last spring, and offered me to be the new superintendent in Central School District 13J. I will always thank you for that, as you are the board chair that hired me. I also watched you last spring handle a few delicate issues facing the school district, as there was a little heat, and Daredevil is known as the man who can stand the heat while continuing to fight for what is right and just. I thank you for your service to the Central School District, and the artist in residence that drew your picture was Marley Hayes, an 8th grade student at Talmadge Middle School. There's your comment. There's your And then at least last but not least for tonight, because we do have two more that we'll recognize at the next meeting. So Director and Board Chair Steve Mosier, your superhero is Batman. Batman is known as the master of everything who uses his tools effectively. This is important to know because Batman doesn't actually have any superhero powers. He actually doesn't. He's a normal guy. This reminds me of you, Steve, as you have so many connections with the greater Independence and Monmouth communities. And you are a person of all types of trades. From your service with the school board to Scouts to Lions to your leadership with me as my first board chair in this new role as the superintendent. I cannot thank you enough for the transparent conversations, for pushing my thinking, for keeping me on task as we continue to move forward. I thank you for your service to the Central School District, and the artist in residence that drew your picture was Lisbeth Rosales, an 8th grade student at Talmadge Middle School. Here's your reading. And here is your picture. if I could ask everyone in the room to please, with me, to thank our school board for their service and recognition that they do in guiding us here in our great Central School District. And now it's back to you.
And we're back to you about talking about adoption of the agenda.
We're going to move a few things around just because we have some guests. So we're going to quickly do the student reports, and then after that we're going to have the auditors that work with us come up and share, and then we'll get back to the agenda from that point. So
Okay.
okay.
All right. So, communications optional, other outstanding reports.
Nope.
So, looks like we're down to Mr. Love. How's that?
Okay, I just have a few things. On the 27th of the month, we have Snowball, our first formal dance. As I said last time I was up here, it's going to be the first time in 9 years that it'll be in the big gym. So that's pretty cool. We're working with the DJ to also bring in the jazz band to play the slow songs. So get that. Yeah, they can't really get the more upbeat stuff, but to bring them to include that side of the school as well. So that was a good idea we had. Next week is going to be our Unity Week, a combined effort with Power Peers, ASBEC, and the Multicultural Leadership Club, celebrating differences with the backgrounds between the students at Central, with different activities during the day, at lunch, and after school, to create a more positive, inclusive environment. So, and then at the end of the beginning of next month, on the 1st and 2nd of February, we're going to have our end of the first semester. The teachers are voting on Thursday whether or not we're going to have the finals, more of a block schedule, 90-minute class periods for that last week. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And could you comment on the daredevil designation for board member?
I don't think I'm going to be calling him that.
Anybody from Power Peers? Going once? Going twice? How about the auditors?
I would like to introduce our audit team who have been with us for the last few years. This is our second year of our lead audit from Jennifer Darst and her trusted assistant, Nicole, who's gotten to spend lots and lots of time with us this year. So Bolt Carlisle Smith are our auditors, and the audit document was in front of you tonight. In the past, you've received that. Tonight we, didn't you give me? Yes, the audit document. So you have this. They'll be reviewing some things on that. And also in front of you tonight is agenda item 24B, which summarizes some findings and our management responses that are included in the audit. But I'll let Jennifer and Nicole talk to you.
All right. So you should have received 2, I think, letters that would have been mailed directly to the board members, and then, of course, the audit report was passed out by Cease's office. So I'm not gonna read every page of this, just kind of do some highlights. But in the audit on page A is our independent auditor's report, and I wanted to just talk about kind of the responsibility of management and the district, and then what our responsibility was as auditors of the financial statements. So we obtain from the district the trial balance from all of your financial records for the year, and so management is responsible for the fair presentation of the financial statements, and that information is obtained through that trial balance. We put it in this format versus a big spreadsheet of all the numbers. But management is responsible for this, the financial statements that we're giving an opinion on. Also responsible for the design and implementation and maintenance of internal controls. So when we do our audit, we are looking at internal controls. We're not giving an opinion on those, but we will point out if we see significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in your internal control system that should be brought to your attention and potentially addressed. So we have some of those in the letter that was sent to you, and we'll talk about those. So on page B, our opinion is over the presentation of the financial statements. If they're fairly presented in all material aspects on the modified cash basis of accounting, because that's how this district reports. So what that means is, on the cash basis, it's income that is received during your fiscal year and checks, money that is dispersed during the fiscal year. So there are no receivables or payables. Long-term obligations and assets are not reported on the financial statements. So these, our opinion is over the presentation, and we have an unmodified opinion, meaning there was nothing noted that was materially misstated under the cash basis of accounting. So the basis of accounting is called as an item of emphasis, just so that you know that under the cash basis of accounting, there's the ability for, you don't necessarily have a picture of everything that happened during the year, because there could be some big payments that are going to be made right after the end of the year, or money that you have coming into you that was related to activity during the year. So we want to make sure that that's kind of called out of what the difference is from GAAP, which is generally accepted accounting on accrual basis. So, but we had no modifications on our opinion. And we'll go ahead and turn to page 1 of the financial statements. So we present financial statements for local governments have 3 different basically bases of accounting, the way these are presented. This first page is your statement of net position, so the district assets, current assets, and then there is one liability on here, and that's related to like withholdings from the last payroll, that federal income tax withholding that needs to be remitted, but it's not outstanding invoices that haven't been paid yet. This is just the only liability that shows up on your cash basis is for those salaries and contracts payable. The net position is presented as restricted if it's designated for a specific purpose. So you have debt service restrictions, and those are dollars that are in your debt service related funds, and they can't be spent for any other purpose than the reduction of your long-term obligations. Student activities is going to be all of the student activity funds from the different schools. Those also cannot be spent for any other purpose than student-related activities. And then there's some residual amounts from grants and other projects that have a specific designation. The rest of your net position is your assets minus the liabilities, is spent on your purpose of education. So there's restriction, but but it's not as restricted as the other things. So during the year, on page 2, you'll see just the third number from the bottom is kind of the most important number on here, in that your increase or decrease of net position. So there was a $44,000 decrease. Basically, your revenues in and your expenses out during the year were pretty close. So just a $44,000 decreases. So you're not having to fund your current operations with a lot of your net position that is from leftover from other years or borrowing from future years. So on page 4, these are the funds that we give an opinion on. So your general fund, the debt service fund, and then the total non-major funds is everything else rolled up into one number. So the district does keep track of all of their activities through different funds. We present those as one aggregate number on the financial statements, and that's what our opinion is on. And then page 5 and 6 just shows the general fund's budget to actual. So the only number on there really that I think is something to call out is that on the expenditures, on page 6 under instruction, there was an over expenditure from the budgeted appropriations, and that was the result of I think a misunderstanding of what a supplemental budget could be prepared for. So you're able to do resolution transfers during the year, and then supplemental budgets can be prepared under certain circumstances. And that would be like if you got a new grant that you weren't expecting, something that could not have been anticipated at the time of the budget adoption. And the appropriation was, or a resolution was done for, I think, changing the beginning fund balance because there was more money left over from the prior year. Unfortunately, that doesn't meet one of the very, very specific exceptions that Oregon, the ORS has. So that did result in an over expenditure of your instruction appropriation. So, but everything else was within the appropriation categories. That over expenditure is reported in another report that we have at the back, which is under the minimum standards for Oregon. So let's see, I think in the notes we'll talk about page 13 through 16. While we don't present your long-term obligations on the face of the financial statements, this is a recap of what the general bonds, capital leases, and your pension bonds are for the district. So all of your long-term obligations are presented there. So that I think shows about $75,000 of long-term obligations for your debt that is related to the district. And then the last
75 million.
75 million?
That's
Yeah.
our debt service.
Yeah. So, on page 25 and 26, we also do show the commitments that are related to, payroll is paid over a 12-month period here, but the fiscal year ends on June 30th. So there's still 2 months of payroll checks related to service at the end of June 30th. So we do show, call out the fact that there is almost $4 million of that, those assets that are on the front page are already designated to be paid for payroll in the months of August, July and August, yeah. And we also show any like really near-term obligations that the district has entered into commitments. So it looks like you had a big a boiler project that was going to be spent, but you'd already signed the papers but hadn't spent the money yet. So we call that out. This year we had a new GASB pronouncement, which is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and we are required to disclose tax abatements. So property taxes are levied by the counties, and if any taxing entity in the district, in the county that the district collects their tax receipts from, has abated taxes for a business in that district, meaning you'll get less property taxes as a result of that, that gets disclosed. So that footnote 13 is what was probably in one of the letters you received saying there was a new pronouncement. So that's where that number comes from. Let's see. When we do an audit, we are also looking at compliance with laws and regulations, and we do that. We test a bunch of different items on page 45. You'll see, and this is the, these are required by Oregon state regulations. So for this report, we say what we, what procedures we performed, and then we say, except for the couple things that we noted, we didn't notice any other instances of non-compliance. So the budget execution that we just talked about, that over expenditure, is a violation of the local budget law under ORS. So that is in this report. And the other piece that's in here is related to, this is a carryover from the prior year under the Single Audit Act. There was a requirement to have written policies and procedures over the expenditures of federal funds. So the district implemented that during the year that we audited, but it wasn't in, or maybe just after the year that we audited, but it wasn't in place during the year. So that's also called out in here. And the next two reports, right after, on page 47 and 49, those are required under the government auditing standards when we perform a single audit. So this talks about internal controls over your financial reporting, and then internal controls and compliance over the federal programs that we tested. So we looked at the Child Nutrition Cluster and the 21st Century Community Learning Centers as the two single audit programs that we looked at. Those popped to the top a lot. So we visited them a couple times the last few years. And the finding that we had kind of carried over from the prior year, because when we looked at that in the year, all of the all the nutrition applications for the year had already been processed at the beginning of the year. So the finding appears again in the next year. So I think for this school year, the correction was in place for the whole year. So we'll look at it again next year to see that correction is in place, but we know that we were not surprised to have the same finding again, because we knew we found it after most of the year had already had happened. So, and the financial statement finding, what we discovered this year in our discussions was that under the payroll processing, there was a lack of segregation of duties, and that can happen in offices where there's a separation of what's going on in the accounting office and in the payroll office, and there's cross checks in there, but we noticed that in your system, in the processing system for payroll, there's the ability for a person that had access to all the modules to be able to run a payroll run without somebody else saying, yes, I released this. So with that, we want to bring that attention to CESA's attention and say, there's the potential for you to have a stop put in there somewhere where one other person has to look at that report before it's released, and somebody can run a check on their own. So, and I think that was management's response on page 52. I know that they were discussing how to kind of correct that. So, again, this kind of finding is something we follow back up on the next year. And you can see on page 55, we had a couple of these findings. We followed up on them. They were corrected, other than number 2? Yeah, number 2 is corrected this year. So, in our letter, I think what we sent was an attachment of the journal entries that were made, the material journal entries we made while we were on site, and I think actually all of them were related to the transition in the accounting department and some year-end entries that normally were made by somebody who was in the role previously, and there was an assumption that they had been made, and we discovered through looking at numbers that it doesn't look like those were made. So CES went through and prepared those, and we posted those. So those journal entries did change the trial balance from what we originally got, and so we communicate that to you, that these were adjustments that were made through the audit process. So, but I think all in all, things, given the transition and the new staff and people learning new roles and everything, we always have a lot of cooperation from people wanting to get us the information and helping sift through what we need. So, and we found your processes and the scanning that people do to get things in electronic form has really, it's very, very helpful, and there's a lot more organization to things than there was at one time when things were all on paper. So it's very, it's very nice to be able to search.
Both ways, yeah.
Yeah. So does anybody have questions about the audit?
I was just curious on the, excuse me, the supplemental budget error, was it a matter of that sort of supplemental budget is not allowed, or did we do it wrong in putting it together?
Changing the beginning fund balance because more money was left over from the prior year is not an unanticipated new source of revenue. So it's a type of supplemental budget that it didn't meet the requirements of what a supplemental budget could be done for. So you can't prepare a supplemental budget if your guess at budgeting was wrong. You can prepare a supplemental budget for unanticipated resources if it's a new resource, again, a new grant, or if you had gone out for the bond and you had all of these resources, then you can do a supplemental budget for the appropriations to spend those funds. But if it's just that we thought that there would be $100,000 of fund balance, but there's actually $300,000 and we want to be able to spend that other $200,000, you can't do that. You have to wait until the next budget cycle to be able to appropriate that unappropriated ending fund balance.
And in your board summary about this and the management responses, I explained that in the way that it won't be meaningful to you, and this is in regard to that process we had done the prior year and we did last year, where because of our cash basis of accounting, we appropriated to spend something in June and the bill didn't come in and we didn't pay it until July, which caused the following year to be over appropriated. And that is something we had done the prior year and it wasn't noticed as a correction. So when we did it last year, it is not a correct interpretation. So that left us at this point, and when we started talking about it in November, it was too late to go back to the board and change our appropriation between categories, which would have covered it. So now we will be doing that differently in the future. We're changing our procurement process, so we won't allow for those June large expenditures. We had done that in the past with curriculum, is one of the expenditures that we've done that for. And so those can just be planned to be earlier so that doesn't catch us in the future.
Yeah, it's hard. That's the thing with the cash basis is it's hard. It's the timing of when the check is written or when the funds are received. And in non-cash basis, in GAAP, you know that we're going to spend $100,000 this year, and if you order it on June 29th and you received it then, it's there and it's an expense of that year. So it is a little bit harder to get exact. But the ORS doesn't really give an exception for cash basis versus non. So yeah, that was what the comment was there for. So.
And so also in the report that is the first item that I mentioned, which is the budget execution. Jennifer mentioned this variance in the appropriations versus expenditure, but the first bullet point is also about noticing a budget.
Oh.
We had made a change in our little budget calendar and dropped one of the notices. Unfortunately, Aurelia was new to doing this, and so she wasn't really fully familiar with that. We are required to put 2 meeting notices prior to the first budget meeting, and we only published 1. So that was another finding. The calendar for this year's already been corrected, so when we send those notices out, that one's already taken care of. Again, our procedure's already in place to avoid the over appropriation due to cash expenditures going over fiscal years. And then the other thing that was mentioned on page 46 is this issue of written procedures for federal grant awards, and that is, we are developing that and we are communicating that. So then on the second page of my report to you there about the schedule of finding and questioned cost, and they mentioned this, they have to do a separate series of tests for federal funds. They have very different requirements. And Jennifer mentioned the payroll processing. So we are working with the software vendor, for example, and in accounts payable, which we had the same situation. Somebody could, put in an invoice, pay the invoice, and it was out the door before there was a check and balance. And we found that there was a step in there that could be segregated away from the accounts payable person. And so now I have to go in and say, I see all the invoices you've entered, and I can release them so that the accounts payable department can print the checks. That does not exist in the payroll system. There is not currently a way to take any part of the process. My payroll person either can do all of it, or I have to have 2 people doing it. So we're working on that, looking at it. That's the initial concept. Apparently, working with our local ESD, everybody has one payroll person who does the process all the way through. So it may be a manual fix whereby we say, please don't go beyond this step until Rich or I have had a chance to review a report. We always review after the fact currently. We may stop and have a review prior to that. It wouldn't physically stop the payroll person from being able to do that, but for the most part, we would have that opportunity.
And the internal controls are both preventative and detective. So if it's something that is run, so potentially maybe just somebody running to see if there's any report that they haven't signed off on. Is there a one-off payroll report that's been run?
Right.
And doing that monthly, you would at least detect as opposed to having it be preventative. So it can go both ways in the instance where the software isn't quite up to up to that. So yeah.
So that's something we'll work with them, but that will be taken care of by February payroll. We'll have a new process in place, and then the written procedures will be completely done in February. And there was also a repeat finding about our processing of our free and reduced lunch applications. We had instituted a secondary review, but that person did an initial off, so they had no documentation that we'd done an additional review, and they did find a couple more spots that had not been filled in that needed to be, so we've instituted a third person to look at them. Alex Singer is now looking at them as well, so the new process is in place. That's done for the 17-18 school year, but again, we were looking at something that was already a year old by the time they looked at it.
Yeah.
We had missed a couple. I really
Pesky
appreciate this.
auditors.
These great opportunities for us to learn. This is especially, it was good this year with Tristiger, my right-hand person who had done most of the preparation, audit documentation preparation in the past. And since she left us in early August, we didn't have an opportunity to use her expertise in getting things ready for these guys. It was a little bit of a struggle as I had to learn some of the things I had not been hands-on before. I don't know which buttons to push to get what they want. But it was very good. Our new accounting person, Heidi Brodus, was in place to work with them and learn what kinds of things they need, and appreciate Jennifer, Nicole, and their team for being really patient with us, understanding, and really great about explaining the process, especially to my new folks. And it's always great. I appreciate the learning and the opportunity to review the work we're doing so we can improve. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
As I mentioned on this report, there is a new requirement, and that is that a board actually accept the audit as presented by the accountants, but then also to accept the management responses. So these responses that I've attached to say that you approve, that you think that that's the way, or if you would like to direct us to look into other methods to respond. Because we didn't get a chance to get all this to you in enough time, you can table that until February so that you have a chance to kind of review this and be able to come back and ask questions rather than to accept that tonight.
Well, we could accept it tonight. Right?
You can accept it tonight if you like. If anybody, if I have a suggested motion to do so, if you're interested.
I will.
You don't get to vote anyway.
I know, but I'm just saying, I will go through it. I think some of the things that Cease shared in just looking at our systems and even some of the things that we put into place and still had a few gaps. As he says, for as many changes, and I will be honest, as a superintendent, for as many changes that we had in staff, in the fact these are, we have areas to improve on, but again, only a handful of concerns. It just goes to show that we have good processes in place, and I think I agree with Cease. I think the audit is a great way for us to financially make sure that we are doing the right things, and sometimes we miss rules and not on purpose, but there's things change so rapidly that trying to stay up on top of them we do, but again, we still miss things, and so it does give us an opportunity to really look at our systems moving forward, and we've really had some good conversations already, just how we move forward and making sure that we don't have those in the future, and that's our goal.
I guess I'm not sure that I see that there's anything likely in here that we're going to come back and say, oh, this is unacceptable. I mean, these look like pretty standard kinds of things you find in an audit. Yeah, it'd be great to have a squeaky clean audit sometime, but it's probably not going to happen. And in the meantime,
I'd be nervous if we did, I'll be honest.
it'd just be that Cease finally learned how to hide everything.
We don't need her doing that either, for the record.
They're still here. And
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say that.
For the record, she,
You're not planning a vacation or anything in the future?
No, not right after payroll, now that I know I can run the whole thing, no.
So,
John, you make the motion and I'll second
all
it.
right. So I move to accept the 2016-17 audit as performed by both Carlisle Smith and approve the management recommendations as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Dawn and Jerry. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes. Thank you for your time. And where do we go next?
thank you, ladies.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any public comments? Any public comments, going once, going twice? Okay. A report from the CAA rep. I should just throw you under the bus.
Yeah.
Hi everybody, I'm Adrienne Galt and I'm here from Talmadge tonight, and I just wanted to share out some of the really great things that are going on in our Talmadge community. Our kids are doing some pretty amazing things, and our staff has been helping them get where they need to go. So I just wanted to share out some of the things that have happened in December and that are happening here in January. In December, Mrs. Meyer's service learning class was able to visit the care facility that's across the street from the high school to deliver some cookies for the holiday season. They also were involved in a canned food drive, and I'm not sure what their goal was, but they did say they reached their goal. So congratulations to Mrs. Meyer's service learning class. On December 13th, Mrs. Cutsworth, Mrs. Tessier, and Mrs. Watson took 40-some girls to 7th grade girls to Oregon State University to watch the women's basketball team play against Savannah State. The girls had a wonderful time on the trip touring campus, and the Beavers won, so that was kind of fun too. We had 2 actually awesome music concerts in December. Our Talmadge band, under the direction of Mr. Probst, played on December 12th, and our Talmadge choirs were under the direction of Mrs. Nelson on the 14th. Both of them had just fantastic concerts. Our 6th graders also were involved in a staff versus student basketball game on December 14th. Our staff for the 6th grade is not as large as it could be, I guess, and they invited the web students to join them, so they had a fighting chance. Everybody had a good time at the basketball game. On December 14th,
Who won?
I did not hear the final
Okay.
score. Do you know, Mr. Lavalley? Oh, okay. Staff always wins. There you go.
We're keeping score.
They're all winners.
On December 14th, I, after studying about Finland in our cultures class, was able to take my cultures class over to Salem to go ice skating. And most of the kids had not ever been ice skating before. They had a great time. Found it to be very challenging, but they would all do it again. We, in conjunction with, well, I'm going to start about the Talmadge part of it. So Talmadge has a history of decorating our doors for the holidays, and we have done this for years, and it's often a competition between grade levels or sometimes between teachers. But this time we were challenged from the bigger CEA group. And so we had started our door decorating challenge before we had gotten word about the CEA part of it. And then CEA teamed up with the OSEA to make this a little bit of a competition. So all of our teachers in our building had door decorations up for the holidays. After having a partner from the OSEA come with me, we got to go and look at a few different doors, and it was a unanimous vote that Mr. Beatley's door was amazing. So congratulations to him. He will be receiving his prize eventually. Talmadge is having a Stranger Things Winter Ball dance this Friday night. The purpose of it is to help us do a fundraiser so that we can continue to take our 7th graders on field trips this year. And so the dance will be from 6 to 8 p.m. I've had over 50 students volunteer to help me put this whole dance together. So I've had kids with me every night for a while now. And it's been fun. They're all having a good time. One more congratulations to go out goes to Mr. Beery and Mr. Beatley and both of our Lego robotics teams. In recent competition, they both won and were offered opportunities to go to a statewide tournament, which is scheduled for January 13th at Liberty High School in Hillsborough. So good things happening at Talmadge. Thank you.
Thank you. So Denise, who'd you send us?
I have sent you Maurice Reed from Transportation.
This is Reed from the Bus Barn. The bus lady.
I'm even dressed in yellow and black. Good evening. I'm happy to know most of you already. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Maurice Reed, bus driver at Transportation. And Denise suggested that I come and just give you a quick report on some of the things that we're doing. We typically try to do some community service events throughout the year. So typically one of the things we do is we do a giving tree. It's the Christmas tree where you take the tag and it's kind of an anonymous gift, but it'll have the name and gender. So this year, usually we'll approach some staff at school and say, what families do you guys know that are most in need? So this year we bought gifts for a family that had suffered a residential fire in Monmouth and were displaced. And in the course of that, we gave them gifts, but apparently later on we found out that there were 2 families that were displaced. So we ended up serving 2 families this year with the giving tree. And we also brought them over a Christmas tree provided by the Scouts and ornaments and the whole shebang. So they were delighted with the gifts. It was a huge outpouring for these 2 families. Another thing we did earlier on was for Veterans Day, this is something we haven't done before, but for the veterans in our department, not so much community outreach, but a little internal community outreach, we served them breakfast. The people who were not veterans, we made a huge pile of bacon and eggs and all the fixings for all the people in our department who were veterans. So I think they appreciated that. And ongoing, we will have a food drive coming up. We typically do a food drive in the spring. So if you see any opportunity for community service along those lines, please let us know. We're always kind of looking for people that we can help out. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Maurice. Administrative reports, we have none. We're back to Cece again.
Thank you. Sorry to be such a dead hog. Also in front of you tonight, your financial report through November 30th. And I promise you that all of your expenditures are within the appropriated amounts. I double checked them all and we are in compliance. And that is the main thrust of this report rather than detail that will come next month. Any questions?
We're down to you.
No question? I just have 2 items just to share. The first item is in regards to the Central High School principal search. We have met with the staff at the high school, gathered some information from them, actually asked them, we hung up some what I'm gonna call butcher paper and asked them for a week to, if there's anything else that they thought of, that they would write that down, and excuse me, and then we would get that from them. So we've started that process. Tomorrow, we are inviting parents and community to join us on the 9th at 6 p.m. at the Central High School auditorium, as we're wanting to gather input from our community in regards to the high school principal search. I will do a short presentation, really just giving what we're going to show as a tentative outline for the process, and then we're going to follow up by with some time for parents to come out into the cafeteria area, have a couple different stations where they can gather information. We can gather information from them, really focused on just the both the characteristics and job descriptions that we're looking for the high school principal. So it should last no longer than an hour. That is the goal. Excuse my voice, like Cease. I think everyone in the central office is finding gruesome things. So it shouldn't last more than an hour. And so we're looking forward to seeing as many people as we can at 6 p.m. tomorrow night.
Who's moderating? Hopefully not you.
It's a combination of our central staff. And really we are there to ask the questions of what are you looking for? And then describing and giving people the opportunity to talk. We will have translators there to just be able to make sure we've been making phone calls. Our scholars, bilingual scholars that work with us that are at Western have been making phone calls to our parents as well. So we're hoping for a good turnout from the community. I was at Lions today and Ed also shared with them, please, if you're interested, we are looking for anyone in the community to give us input to make sure that we capture everything as we start our search moving forward. So we're pretty excited about that. I want to thank the staff at Central. They have been very transparent with us as we begin this process. We are listening to them and especially as we build what the process is going to look like for interviews and et cetera. They had some really good ideas that we're beginning to incorporate, and we'll share with them as we start down this road. So really excited to begin this process to find our new leader at the high school. And please know, Jan will be missed. I love that woman. I am so glad that she stayed on in my transition year, but I know I know she's excited for us to start the search as well moving forward. The other piece I just want to share, because I've received a lot of questions, is in regards to just some information about Ballot Measure 101, which is coming up for a vote across the state on January 23rd. Many of our parents and community members may have already received the ballot in the mail. So again, I just want to share a few points because I have been asked of the impact that the measure could have on us in the Central School District. So I'm going to give a little bit of background information, and then if there are questions, we can have that conversation. And Cease, please do not hesitate to jump in here as well, as you and I have been working through this. So I'll give you a little bit of background on the ballot measure. In 2014, Oregon chose to become part of the Affordable Care Act, and the state extended Medicaid coverage to an estimated 350,000 previously uninsured residents. We are now faced with a choice of either cutting health insurance benefits to hundreds of thousands of Oregonians. Because of that, the legislature is returning to their previous budget solutions, which is the hospital-provided tax, and potentially new healthcare premium assessments to avoid those cuts in healthcare, and then having people uninsured again. So that's just the sort of the history of where we are with the ballot measure. In regards to funding, the Medicaid costs are largely reimbursed by the federal government, and obviously adding people to Medicaid is more revenue again, less uninsured people, And I'll just to give you an example, so by doing this, for example, we have less people going to hospitals that are uninsured, which can lead to higher costs that to some degree we are all paying for. So some of these dynamics is why you are seeing the healthcare organizations that are really for the most part supporting the idea of the new tax as opposed to other drastic cuts to the healthcare. So how does that impact us? So I just want to walk through impact if there's a no vote and impact if there's a yes vote on just the school approach. So if Oregon voters say no to the ballot measure 101, they are saying no and getting rid of the tax that the legislation imposed. Okay, so if you say no, then that tax that the legislation has put forward will go away. If that tax is eliminated, the legislature will be forced to come up with a financial plan to cover the shortfall. That estimated shortfall is between 300 to as high as 500 million in this year. So that's revenue along that, really when you talk about the federal match as well, again, that's just in a 1-year biennium. So again, no, which means no tax, we're going to be looking at a 300 to 500 million shortfall in the budget for the state. If Oregon voters say yes to the ballot measure 101, they are saying yes to upholding the tax that the legislature had imposed really last year. And then the second year of the biennium would be funded under the current plan that we have. Our budget, everything would stay the same for us. This would mean the tax would be imposed, and again, I want to be clear because this is information that may very well be passed on to consumers throughout, whether it be increased insurance premiums sometime in the future. So again, I just want to be transparent in the information with this. In regards to the schools receive around 39% of the state budget. 39% of the state budget, which is approximately, which if we really have to cut the 300 to high 500 million across all the systems, that's what they would be doing. So the state would be looking at all general fund systems and would have to make those cuts, including us, in the next year. So the legislature could make and choose different approaches to that or options to try and backfill that if there is a shortfall with that. So Cece and I just have done an estimated, and let me be clear, this is estimated cost just based on some quick numbers that we have done. So that we could lose in a range from $1 to $3 million that we would be looking at as a deficit. So again, I felt it was important because I have been receiving information from just different community members that we share this information about the ballot and the impact and it could have on us. And I just ask people in the community, read your voters pamphlet, talk to your nurses, talk to our healthcare providers. I really think it's important to get all the information that you need to make those decisions. And then I just ask people to get out and vote on January 23rd because this is an important piece. It's in January time, which is not known for having any type of ballot measure. So again, as you talk to your neighbors and things, I would just ask that we all really look into that and do your due diligence. And please get out and vote. That is it for me.
Well, thank you very much. So the next thing is upcoming board activities. So we have an upcoming PLC meeting on the 22nd. We'll meet at 6 o'clock. And then on February 5th will be our next board meeting. And that brings us down to the consent agenda. So included in your packet are the minutes of December and the policy updates that were presented for the first reading in December.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
I heard the first, but I didn't hear the second.
I'll second.
Moved by Steve and seconded by Peggy to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passed. And that moves us to personal actions, which we have none. And That brings up Division 22.
Yep, and really this is information, and I'm going to have Dr. Vickery come forward just because if there are questions, she
Come on down.
She can be up here as we go through this to share a little bit of information.
You are the next contestant.
And this really does not go to a vote. We do need to have on the record within our board meeting that we have reviewed the Division 22. So I'm going to give a little bit of information of what it is, and then a couple areas that we are really working in. So Division 22 is the standards for public elementary and secondary schools in which there are 55 areas that school districts must report on the status of compliance based on those rules. So all Oregon schools must report to their respective communities as to the district's status with regard to the state standards. And this really needs to be, we have to have the report to the state by February 1st, and obviously our board meeting in February is after, so again, obviously where we're looking at it in January. So the two areas, and again, I just want to be clear, we are 2 of the 55. I think as we've gone through as a staff the report, there are areas that we know we are in compliance, but there is growth to make sure that we shore up our compliance as a school district, but we are in a good place and we'll continue to work on that. But the 2 areas that I want to bring to your attention where we are not in compliance is 58022-2050, which is the human sexuality education. And that specifically is that we have to, every school district needs to provide an age-appropriate, comprehensive plan of instruction focused on human sexuality education, HIV and AIDS, sexually transmitted infection, and diseases preventions in elementary and secondary schools as an integral part of our health education and other subjects. So there are standards now tied to health that start in kindergarten and go all the way through 12th grade. Very similar when we talk about Common Core standards, similar standards in the health field, and there are a lot of them. To be very honest, there are a lot of them that as we started to look at, looking in those. So this is really focusing on the development of a curriculum for health K through 12. And again, we have started that process. We have a adoption of a health curriculum, but as we continue to work through this and to move into compliance, and please know, we are not the only school district that will not meet this. This has been a difficult one. I will tell you, the same standards are being adopted in Washington, so I had seen these before, and Washington gave us till 2019 to start implementation because we knew that it was going to take us time to really look and dive into that. So just know that there's work to be done. We want to be intentional about it because it needs to be age appropriate through K-12, looking at all of those systems. Anything you want to add, Dory or Dr. Vickery?
No, just that if you recall, we did adopt the Great Body Shop last spring for K-5 health, and that does align with the new Aaron's Law, and I believe I talked about that last year for Division 22. And it seems what happens is my second year of looking at Division 22, they can kind of tend to throw a few other things in there. Last year was TAG and how we're going to identify underrepresented populations. We really had to address that. So this is the one for this year, of which all districts will be having to do a comprehensive K-12 human sexuality plan.
So just to clarify, do we have one now and we need to update it, or we don't have a plan? We have a curriculum, but
We have curriculum, and we have a team of secondary PE and health teachers that have been to the, well, I'm at ESD to review what the state has approved. They have a recommendation that we're going to start exploring and see where we're at. And then we would just go through our normal curriculum adoption procedures. This is the year to adopt health curriculum anyway.
And then the only other area that we are out of compliance is 5810-022-2220, which is health services. There is a lot tied to health services, from nursing to different programs that we offer, but where we are out of compliance is tied to first aid and CPR. And so I'm going to read it. It says, each school shall have at a minimum at least one staff member with a current first aid card for every 60 students enrolled, and an emergency response team per building consisting of no less than 6 persons who hold current first aid CPR cards and who are trained annually in the district and building emergency plans. We believe, for the most part, we are in compliance, but we had one school that confirmed that because of the expiration of first aid and CPR cards, as we followed up, we are out of compliance. So we will put plans in place for that part to make sure that we can monitor those within that. As we went through this, I think Dr. Vigor and I spent a whole lovely afternoon going through it. I know Cease did a lot of work. I know that Ms. Heilman did a lot of work. So I'm really focused on, in Oregon, we get it in December, literally as we go on to break, and then it's due pretty quickly. So we're gonna back build to really start looking at that probably over the summer and to shore up some of those things so we can have a little bit more time. So we'll build that into our just our daily district office strategic planning as we continue to move forward, so we're in compliance with Oregon Department of Education. But I'll be honest, I felt pretty good in the fact that we only had two out of compliance places.
Now that says schools, right? That doesn't include the district office?
No,
I don't think it did. It just said schools.
That should be, if we should have a policy that says that we put it across all our buildings. So,
I think we can definitely talk about that, yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, the process to identify the 2 areas of non-compliance was the review that you guys said. It's not some type of external review, it's an internal review.
Correct. So we literally at times, Dr. Vickery went through and there were sections that she said, hey, Cease, here's these, can you make sure, is there anything that we're missing? At times we had to reach out to the principals who followed up with us. Again, one of this is my learning first year is again, my previous state, we would get them in December, we wouldn't have to show compliance until April. So again, this is, as C says, I'm constantly learning in the new state. And so we will back map a little bit sooner because again, we can look at those and have an idea of what might be coming from that piece of it. So again, it was a good process that we went through, very tedious, but I think that's important for us at times to do that, and then we'll build that system. So all of our departments, it's clear which ones is who's responsible for which, and then going through those moving forward that we are truly in compliance with all of the measures there. There are a lot of them, 55.
What happens if we're not in compliance?
We're not sure. That's a good question.
That's a great question. I have heard that the state will select 5 districts to review, and then they will check up on you for the process and what you did and what you have in place.
And
that's all I've been told by my colleagues because I've kind of asked around.
And we had to go in. So the document that we will, now that we get it, once we get it into the minute records, we will. The document that Dr. Vickery sent, it explains exactly what we did, our processes that we went through. I think they're looking for a little bit of internal controls on the administration side, and again, then just being diligent. And having one school out may not be a big deal, but again, I want us to be crystal clear in what we are in compliance with and what we aren't. And so, like I said, there are certain areas that we're in compliance, but could there be some things that we need to tighten up to make sure? Yeah, and we're gonna work through that through as we go into, because this happens every year.
And some of you may recall several years ago, the state, when we were in the midst of the recession, the state put in abeyance Division 22 reporting and meeting those standards.
And all of the kids that year were educated to a substandard level, I'm sure.
And we followed all the health and safety laws, and yes, everybody assumed everybody was.
That's Spider-Man humor.
Yes, it is.
I don't know if I like it.
Before you go, Dr. Vickery,
Yes.
before you go, is there any part of this that needs to be reviewed by parents, the human sexuality part of it? Or
That's just part of our curriculum adoption. So once we have proposed curriculum, teachers review it, we make sure it meets the state requirements. We send out notifications for parents that they come and preview that. But as with all of our human growth and development curriculum, the schools have it available for parents to come in and preview it, and then they have an opportunity to opt their child out of that instruction. And that is communicated out to our parents.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions?
Okay, that's it, don't need to vote, just information.
Yep. So that gets us down to comments by individual board members.
That's for me.
I
just have an announcement.
Against our nicknames.
On February 12th at 5:30 at Maxine's Ballroom is a President Lincoln reenactment. And I've heard from people that have seen this guy that he is pretty amazing, and he's been asked some pretty hard questions, and nobody can stump this guy. So if you're interested in attending, it's February 12th, 5:30 p.m. at Maxine's Ballroom. It's free.
Now, Sea's Ballroom is a meeting place over the
Oh,
Ash
it's-
Creek Animal Clinic on the corner of C Street and Main Street in downtown.
So for all you history buffs,
What day is that?
I don't know.
February 12th.
I
don't
knew
know what
that,
day that is.
as in day of the week.
I don't know.
Oh,
I'll find out. Hold on.
Sorry, I thought maybe you had it there.
It's a Tuesday.
I have a, well,
Monday.
Yep, it's Monday.
It's Monday.
We got it.
a question on this material we received in the packet on graduation requirements. I can almost read this. 3 credits of math shall include 1 unit at the Algebra 1 level and 2 units that are at a level higher than Algebra 1. What would those be? Probably one would be plane geometry. What would the next one be?
pre-algebra 2, or algebra 2, and I'm gonna look at my algebra 2, correct?
Algebra 2 would be a kind of the standard course, yes. There are other choices.
So there are other choices for the kids that maybe are not gonna go to college, gonna go into a vocation, plumbing or electrician or bus driver or other things.
So I think, again, as we start looking at school six, and I'm gonna say it wrong again, high school success, which is previously was known as Measure 98. I think that those are gonna be conversations that we're gonna have with the staff as we, and that committee that we talk with. Because again, I think that there are ways to tie math and those classes that I can, with Miss Waite back there and some of the things that I know that she does in her classroom, again, I think you're gonna have great ways for kids to learn that high level math and being able to put that into what I'm gonna say real world application. And that is part of the goal as we move forward with the high school success planning. Because again, how do you tie those together where kids see the real world, hey, this is in that.
Yeah, this makes sense.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Good question.
Any other comments? I want to thank everybody for coming this evening. If you'll notice, we have action items for future meetings that include renewal and non-renewal, budget committee appointments. Cecil will probably be coming up and asking us for board, or
we'll have a couple of vacancies.
Couple of
I'll let you
vacancies
know so we can look
or
at
different zones.
Do you know what zones they are, C's? Do you know what zones they are?
I don't
Okay.
right now. We haven't
That's fine.
reached out to folks to make sure that they're gonna stick around.
Okay.
We'll be doing that this next week, so.
And
I'll know.
adoption of the calendars in the future, the student license, or the student fee schedule, and our superintendent's evaluation. is all on
Yep.
the forefront.
I just want to articulate the humor. I appreciate that. Again.
And we have no planned executive session, and with that, thank you for joining us tonight.